Welcome to the module Concepts and Practices for the Future Cities. The lecture title is Towards the Achievement of Eco-Cities. First of all, we have to define what an eco-city is. We can follow different approaches. The approach of looking for ecology in cities or the approach for ecology of cities. In the first approach, we look at how ecological systems and processes work in cities in order to be aware, protect and enhance ecology in the built environment. While in the second approach, ecology of cities, we look at how human and ecological systems and processes are in balance in the city, how they coexist and co-evolve in the built environment. So we can say, on one hand, in the first approach, we look at the analysis of single components at the microscale, while in the second, we need a broader vision, a holistic approach, and multi-scale analysis and the nexus among different systems. So the second question is why we need an eco-city model. Of course, that's obvious. Our world has limited resources, and we already exploited these resources more than we should, causing damage to the functioning of the biosphere and having impact on the biosphere itself and also on the atmosphere. We can rely on the theory of 9 planetary boundaries if we want to have more details on the impacts of human beings on our planet. So, in this lecture, I will propose you 8 points for achieving a positive ecological balance and climate neutrality in eco-cities. Which vision will we have for the future city? We have numerous challenges ahead in this transition process, and I will propose you 8 points, again, to address ecological balance and climate neutrality in cities. The first point is we need to embrace a metabolic approach to plan, design, and manage cities. Of course, cities are intended as complex dynamics and living systems shaped by flows and resources. This is nothing new. It was already established in the 70s by Belgian and European scholars. And moreover, we can say that a metabolic approach requires a different understanding of how city works. Usually in traditional planning, we are used to look at structures, so a land use and zoning alone. But moreover, we should also think about that cities have functions and cities evolve and change over time. This is very important to consider temporal and spatial dynamics in the built environment. Again, a city is also a place where goods and services are produced and consumed. It's very important because we have to move attention from production-based accounting of greenhouse gas emissions to consumption-based accounting of greenhouse gas emissions. This is very important because usually when inventories and plans for cities are released, they only consider what is produced in the city, but they don't look at really what is consumed in the city, and we move the attention elsewhere. For instance, we can think about all the goods and items that we buy and we consume in the city that are produced elsewhere. In this globalized world, we have to take responsibility also of our consumption. So how to apply this metabolic approach in urban planning and design? We are trying this in our studios with our students at Politecnico di Milano. We use different models and ways. First of all, second law thinking in urban planning is very important. It means that we have to recognize that energy in the city has different meanings. It can be good quality energy, like exergy, or it can be less useful energy, like entropy. So this is the second law of thermodynamics. And this is very important because then we can recognize how we can better use quality energy, exergy, and reduce entropy in the system. We have several examples how to deal with resources at territorial and regional level and city level. An example is urban afforestation processes and projects. This is very popular now, and also in Milan we have a Forestami project where we developed a scenario on how to implement tree coverage over the metropolitan area of Milan. And we can not only design for a greener city, but we can also have in mind that this biomass will generate resources that are useful for the city in terms of fertilizers or energy production through biodigestion. Another example is the circularity model for deep energy retrofitting of cities. We know that Europe is requiring climate neutrality by 2050, and we have a lot of building stock to regenerate nowadays, and all this regeneration requires demolition and reconstruction processes. This is very challenging, of course, and requires a systemic overview and management of all these resources that are flowing around the city. Of course, there is a collaborative effort that is required by local authorities to create the infrastructure and the logistics for all this deep energy retrofitting. The second point is designing having in mind the life cycle of processes. So when we think about sustainable development and sustainable development goals, we usually focus in the design phase, but we have to think about that the city is a operational system that happens to be in reality. And we need to look at sustainable development processes also in operational settings. So it's very important beyond design to look at co-design phases and how citizens and local stakeholders are involved, but also the construction site, so the implementation of solutions, and of course operation and co-management of these solutions, and sometimes also the deconstruction and end of life of our projects in the city. The third point is policy integration for climate neutrality and ecological transition. We are used to be overwhelmed with the number of policies, like mitigation policies, acting in different fields of energy reduction, improving energy efficiency, or producing renewable energy. On the other side, more recently, we are also dealing with adaptation strategies, and adaptation strategies, of course, try to reduce the impact of climate change diffusing adaptation measures. They are now more and more linked, and also greening strategies are entering as a way to combine those climate actions, because greening strategies, I mean really afforestation and diffusing nature-based solutions in cities, is a good way to really look at mitigation and adaptation together. Of course, more recently, biodiversity preservation strategy was really promoted, and it's pushed by European Union in order also to take into account nature and natural cycles in our cities. And this is another level of complexity that we have to add. So we need this policy integration to be fulfilled. Of course, when we think about cities, we need a clear picture in mind about these flows that happen in a built environment. We have different, of course, themes, different places where sustainability happens, and we need to recognize the links, the strong links and complexity that we have among different areas. For instance, think about energy and mobility. More and more, these two aspects are related because of the electrification of mobility. So imagine that the car and the battery of a car is not only related to mobility, but it also a strong energy storage device that we have to think about in a more comprehensive way. So we have to look at this complexity of flows and different aspects at urban level. The fourth point is ecological transition intended as a community challenge. Of course, this is very important because we have to think about how to involve citizens and people in this transition to eco-cities, launching, for instance, local green deals to involve all the stakeholders according to a quadruple helix approach. Of course, EU, for instance, is pushing a lot to apply different methods and in co-creation, also through living lab approaches and to create innovative ecosystems. And of course, the final goal is to promote really a shared governance for a successful ecological transition. How can we achieve this citizen engagement? First of all, we have to create this proper environment for achieving transformative urban capacities, which refers to the collective abilities, attributes, and potentialities that enable a city or urban area to undergo significant positive changes, advancements, and shifts in various aspects such as social, economic, and environmental and cultural dimensions. Of course, we have a big responsibility as planners and local authorities to provide open data and decision-making platforms, and all this has to be transparent and available to all. So looking at how to, for instance, generate information that local authorities, citizens, and private actors can rely on. We can create a lot of information, like mapping the potential production of renewable energy in cities, for instance, or creating information display for citizens, and especially how to communicate environmental data is very important, and this is something we have to really investigate, how to best communicate data to citizens. Another way is to look for a more proactive involvement of citizens in decision-making processes. Co-mapping, for instance, is a way to involve citizens in this challenge. For instance, here I report an example from Milan, Clever Cities project that launched a contest to map and award the best practices in nature-based solution interventions in the city, like green roofs and green walls. And this was a tremendous occasion to map the overall status of MBS in the city of Milan. But we can also use different tools like citizen science and participation methods to really create what we call co-monitoring communities. Or we can also involve citizens in participation processes in different ways to help them understanding what adaptation strategies are, for instance, through climate walks or focus groups that focus on really urban design potential interventions that we can apply. This does not only apply to local communities and urban areas, but also, for instance, to production areas, industrial production areas and commercial areas that involve different types of stakeholders. The fifth point is health and the city. Health and the city means that we need to look at new approaches to recognize that health is not something that only refers to human beings as individuals, but it also refers to human beings as a collaborative, as a community. And not only human beings, but also it's important to take into account the overall health of the built environment and of nature. So of environment, animals, plants, and people together. This is very important because it gives us some feedback and important approaches also to design and planning. Again, we can use different ways to make people aware about the importance of health, recognizing which are the factors, aspects that impact on human health. We can do it through, again, focus groups, walks together with citizens, and working together on recognizing and better framing the concept of urban health. 6 points, designing for a new climate. That's very important. climate is changing, but also cities can actually have an impact on climate, reducing and mitigating, for instance, temperatures in the city. Of course, we cannot envision and imagine our future moving from one air conditioning bubble to another. We are used now to have air conditioning in all our working spaces, in our houses, in our cars. And what is the future of outdoors if we are getting used to these air conditioning bubbles? Of course, urban heat islands are becoming a very relevant topic for the surviving of cities themselves. And in a study that we conducted in Milan, in hot days, the difference between rural and urban areas can achieve up to 7 degrees, so which is really a lot and can really change also the energy consumption of cities. So in this effort, it's not only about energy consumption, it's also about human comfort again and health. So how to also look at the human comfort in cities and try to understand how temperature and high temperatures have an impact on our health. That's another point. So we need to understand the role of urban form in affecting climate and our health. That's why we refer to the concept of local climate zones that we have mapped and categorized for the city of Milan, for the metropolitan area as a whole. And this classification is based on the different forms, materials that the city shows. And we can then, based on this classification, refer to tailored measures to address climate actions. The seventh point is the following, that cities evolve with nature. That's very important. So we need to find ways to co-create nature-based solutions and involve local stakeholders in this challenge. We can use different methods as we provided in the Clever Cities project, and also find ways to get people on board at the local and community level. Finally, and a very important point, 8, is that nature and non-human agents should be taken into account as stakeholders. In this image that I'm showing, produced by an artist, Joel Tauber, in 2005, is depicting the death of a tree as an art installation project, and the artist tried to look at this tree and the dying process of this tree to recognize that we usually use nature as a solution for improving our environment, our health, but we forget about the rights of nature. So this dying tree reveals that we need ways to give voice to nature. Of course, art is a good way for communicating, but we have also other tools available. We can look at policies that give voice to nature, like recognizing rights to nature in decision-making processes, but also technological innovation like sensing, diffusing sensors over the environment will generate this concept of Internet of Nature and give voice to nature in order to recognize when nature is suffering or nature is healthy. Thank you for the attention.